Today is Thursday, July the 11th of 2024. This is the Chapter 49 podcast. I'm Larry Lannan, a volunteer dealing with communications and a retiree. We're happy you've chosen to take a little of your valuable time and spend it with us. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana, and we welcome our chapter president, Duncan Giles.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
Try to give you a nice in Duncan Giles. That's the best Duncan Giles I've done for a long time. I have to practice doing that.
Yeah, it's better than hearing from the wife, Duncan Giles. That yours is better when you do that.
At least she's not using your middle name. Somebody I talked to somebody once and said they didn't have a middle name, and somebody in the room said, "Well, what did your mother call you when she was really angry with you?" That's when I heard my middle name most of the time. I want to say this is July 11th. We're recording on a Thursday, and July 11th is an important date for me. You know why, Duncan?
Why?
July 11th, 1983, my first day as an IRS employee. What I remember mostly, I started at the bottom. I took classes at night to become a tax law specialist and manager later. But I came in at the bottom. I was a grade 3 supply clerk. We don't even have supply clerks in the federal buildings much anymore. But I was a supply clerk. Somebody else had to do my time card. I was a clerk and couldn't even do time cards. That's how low on the totem pole I was. What I do remember is that the supply manager in the Capehart building sent one of his people down to the personnel office just to make sure that their new clerk showed up. And the guy he sent seemed really happy. Oh, we're going to have a clerk now. You know how that is. So they were happy to see me just to get a human body and living and breathing into the office. And actually, we had a really interesting, eclectic group of people in the supply and mail room. That was quite an experience. Really enjoyed working with those guys and all the other groups in IRS. But that's when it began. It all started July 11th of 1983.
I'm going to give you a close date to that. July 12th, tomorrow. Got to give shout out to my daughter Madison for her birthday. Her birthday is tomorrow.
Maddie, happy birthday to you. If you're listening on or near your birthday, glad that that's the case. She's a full-fledged Southern Indiana person now, living. Is it Huntingburg area? It's down in that area of the state, right? My parents are from Martin County, so we know that area well. And I know that part of the state very well.
Mental health professional down there.
Well, you're always happy to say that, and you should be proud of her. She does great work. Let's move on to our subjects for this podcast. The first one we're going to talk about is information technology. Now, it's no secret that IRS has had more than a little trouble staying up with technology. I always tell the story. I think it ties into starting with IRS in 1983, because in the 1970s and into the early 80s, IRS was known as a federal agency on the cutting edge of technology. I mean, we had some of the best technology in government, and we surpassed a lot of private sector people. We just had the best systems you could have, and they all worked very well. The problem is we got way behind. I can get into the reasons, but you probably wouldn't want to hear it. So in getting information technology employees into IRS has always been something it's of a high priority. So there is a program where IRS can go outside and try to hire people outside the service to come in and do some of this IT work. There's only one thing NTEU ever asked, and I think it's a reasonable thing to do. Look internally first for these candidates. I remember somebody worked with me in toll-free, and this lady was a whiz in technology. In fact, I remember telling her own manager, I said, "Do you realize what talents this lady has?" And they finally started using her, and she did wonderful things for that toll-free office because of her tremendous knowledge. So we have people working in various jobs at IRS that may have great IT knowledge and experience, but they're not in that job right now. All NTEU ever asked, as I recall, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that, okay, IRS, if you need to go outside to get IT professionals, we certainly understand that. We're not against that. All we ask you to do is look for these internal candidates that could be lurking anywhere within an operation with tens of thousands of employees working for it. Why don't you look internally first? Look at those people before you go outside, which is what we always thought was the agreement. But it appears things have not been working as planned lately. So tell us what brought all this up, what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of an issue right now. IT has always been one of the areas of the IRS that, in kind terms, has liked to do their own thing. And in basically what they've done is they went and were looking for direct hires from the outside, which, as you said, is all well and good. If they've given first crack at these jobs to internal candidates to allow them to go through the wonderful USA Jobs process to apply for those. Well, apparently IT decided not to do that and go with the direct hires first. Now this has resulted in a national grievance from NTU, basically saying just that. You have failed to follow the national agreement, which says you'll look to internal candidates before you go external. As again, we have no problem with bringing in folks from the outside. Absolutely. We need fresh blood in here. But first, let's try and give the positions, to folks who've been here working, busting their butt, doing their jobs. But as you said, they may have special talents for IT, or it may work well for them there rather than where they're at. And let's give them the chance first. And apparently, from what we've seen, they did not do that. So national office had to file a grievance on this to try and correct the problem and give the employees the fair shot that they should have.
I think this is tragic because we want IRS to have the best IT people. And it isn't that much difficult. It doesn't set them back time-wise that much to find out if there are internal candidates. It just doesn't. So this is just a matter of them being the management of IRS actually doing what they have contractually agreed to do.
Yeah, I mean, it very simply at the base level, that's exactly it. I understand that right now we still don't have enough people to do vet the hiring and HCO. They're working on that, but it's still a struggle when they're trying to do these hires. But to go out and do direct hire for IT without considering internal candidates is the wrong way to do it, both morally and contractually. So we're trying to make sure that that gets corrected.
What kind of remedy do you request in a situation like this? Are there people who could have been qualified who can say, hey, I need to be considered, or maybe I need to be directly hired? I mean, what do you have a clue as to what remedies might be available if this grievance turns out in favor of NTU?
Yeah, usually the remedies are things like priority consideration or open up more spots for the internal candidates. Sometimes if things are done intentionally, and at this point we don't know whether it was just an oversight or done intentionally, I like hanging people out by their legs from a third floor window. Apparently that's not a good remedy anymore. And for those who want to report me to TIGTA, it was a joke.
Well, I'm fairly certain TIGTA is a regular listener to this podcast.
Some TIGTA, I have been told that some TIGTA folks do listen to this, mostly for their enjoyment and education, but also, to make sure that I stay, quote, in line, which has never happened. So
I'm the retired guy, so they can't do much to me. But for you, what can I get Duncan Giles on? Well, you're a little too smart for that, but they're going to try. No, I actually thought there might be a TIGTA agent assigned to listen to this. Who knows? I suspect.
I hope not. If they are, they deserve combat pay.
Well, they can file their own grievance on that. Okay. I want to move on to COVID. When we started this podcast, what, 4 years ago? Over 4 years ago. We started, I think, in April, didn't we, of 2020? So we stopped celebrating our birthdays after the first one. But we are over 4 years. And when we started this, that's all we talked about was COVID because we were shut down. I mean, I think we were all on weather and safety leave. I don't think they'd even geared up toll free to work in their homes at that point. So at that time, it was a shutdown. Sir, most operations, private and government, were shut down mostly at that time when COVID was going. So COVID was a serious emergency when we started this podcast over 4 years ago. Well, some of the emergency status has been slowly coming off, and we've seen another example of that recently. So explain to us, this mostly has to do with COVID, getting shots, treatment for COVID for family members of people working for the government. So explain what this change will mean.
Yeah, and this is something that was near and dear to our heart, and that we, in the 22 national agreement, we made sure that this was covered, that people who were going to need a COVID shot, just like they need a flu shot, and we actually anticipated this, that you would need these yearly boosters, would get administrative time to do it, just like you do for the flu. You get time to go travel to, travel back, uh, and time to, be at the doctor's office or wherever you get your shot to get this. Well, in addition to that, during the COVID epidemic, when it was the national emergency that's no longer there, you also got administrative time for taking a family member to get a COVID shot. And what really impacted IRS employees even more than that was you would also get recovery time if you had a negative impact from the COVID shot itself. There were a lot of people that would feel under the weather, get violently ill, those types of things. And you would get a certain amount of time as what we called recovery time from that shot. Well, that recovery time, as well as taking a family member to get a COVID shot, is no longer under admin time. So people are saying, well, what if I have a reaction? Am I in trouble or anything like that? No, it's that you now simply have to take sick leave. You can get admin time, travel to, travel from getting a shot, the time it takes you to get the shot. You still get administrative time for that. But what you don't get is, if you do have a reaction to your COVID shot, then you are going to have to take sick leave, or annual leave in lieu of sick leave, or credit hours, whatever it may be, instead of administrative leave has been previously. So I think that's an important thing for people to know, because that is quite the change.
I meant to mention this to you, Duncan. I'm not getting any younger. And every time I, produce this podcast, I do require some recovery time. So I thought I would get paid for that. But then I remember what I got paid for doing this. I've, zero, zero is, I think, what, 20% of zero is still zero. So I guess,
yeah, we're going to give you your regular rate. No problem whatsoever.
But no, all kidding aside, family members no longer covered. That's the change, with that level of emergency being taken off the table. Let's move on to something that everyone should feel very good about. The President of the United States has recognized federal employees just generally for being a part of the success of his administration. There are many successes. I think you would say, anybody would agree with, were successes. Now, how you want to play that politically is up to you. But the fact is, President Biden has accomplished a lot. And I would have to say the IRS has been a part of that, trying to do what the administration wants, including a release that just came out the other day that more high-income taxpayers are paying their fair share of tax through audits. That's something that's fairly new. IRS hadn't really touched those people in the past, and that is beginning to change. And it's our enforcement people using that push from the top to get that done. So the president has been recognizing federal employees for their role in providing the successes he's been able to accomplish. But we do have we appreciate that. No, we don't want to shirk that at all. But we do have something else we'd like to tell the president. What would that be?
We would also love pay parity. And when we talk about pay parity, the president's proposed a 4.5% pay raise for the folks in the military, and a 2% raise for folks in the civilian workforce. And we believe, as it been in the past couple of decades, for the vast majority of the time there's been pay parity, it's been the same type of raise. So we believe it should be 4.5% instead of the 2%. There's some congressional bills out there that are wanting us to get 7%, and I appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, but I don't think it's going to get much traction, especially in this Congress. So I would really hope that the folks in Congress take a look at this and say, yeah, we do need to keep the pay parity thing in mind and make sure that we get our folks who are in the civilian workforce the same pay raise as our folks in the military, who deserve every penny they're getting. That's why I'm not saying they should only get 2%. We should get the same 4.5% that they're getting.
Yeah, people need to know just procedurally. The president is proposing 2% average. We don't know how that would. Do we know? Did the president say how'd that come out locality versus across the board? I don't think he even said that, but there would be some. Normally would be like 0.5% would go to locality, but we really don't even know that for sure. And
Right.
this, you have to. But the point I want to make here is that even though the president has proposed this, and if the Congress is silent, that's where the raise goes. Congress can insert a higher raise for us. They could give us pay parity if they wish to do so. That's why it's important you stay in contact with your federal lawmakers. Make sure you follow the rules. Don't do this on your own time or with your own. Make sure you do it on your own time and your own equipment and software and so forth. Don't do it during work time or with IRS equipment or software. So you still have the right to do that on your own time and should if you have strong feelings about that. You're two senators and member of Congress. So again, we appreciate the recognition, Mr. President. We've worked with you on many things, and we support you in many ways in terms of what you've tried to do within government, your proposals to carry out what you and the Congress have passed. But give us a nicer raise. That would make it a whole lot better for us.
Yeah, it sure would. And I do appreciate the recognition. It's one of those things where, you hear the term deep state and, things of that nature. And, what the civilian federal workforce is supposed to be is working for the good of the American taxpayer. That's what it's supposed to be, not one political party or another. We're not loyal to one political party or another. As, Doreen Greenwald said, and many have said before, the federal workforce is a microism of all the entire population. You've got some for, every political spectrum you can think of. And that's what makes America great. But, to know that all of us who are working in the federal workforce swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not to a particular party. And that's what we're working for, towards the good of the people. So when I hear things like, deep state and somebody's working for me or against me or something like that, it just infuriates me because we're working for the greater good. That's our purpose, to work for the greater good. Our salaries are provided to us to help the American taxpayer, either directly or indirectly. And so I really appreciate President Biden acknowledging that federal workers are important and should be recognized. And a great way to do that recognition, a solid way to do that recognition, would be pay parity.
I have a little rant I'm going to go on. I'm sorry, Duncan, you triggered this, but even our collection, people complain, well, there are people doing collection work. Well, the reason we do collection work is because people aren't paying their taxes. And if we can get money out of those people, others don't have to make up the difference. Even with examination division, people going out there doing audits. People need to comply with the tax law, businesses, individuals, the whole thing. So we are serving the public. It's not just taxpayer services, which we work hard at doing. Those of us who have worked in it know we work very hard at serving as best we can. But it's more than that. Even our compliance people, our criminal investigation people, everybody at IRS is trying to what? Administer the tax law in a fair way, the way it was passed by Congress and signed into law by the president. That's what we do. And the other thing that always irked me, Duncan, it depends on what the economy is doing. If the economy is flying high and people are getting paid big money, those of us working for the federal government or IRS, you're fools. You're not making any money at all there. If you had any sense, you'd be out in the private sector making a bunch of money. Then when the economy goes south, you guys are doing great. What's the matter with you? We shouldn't even have you people here. Everybody else is suffering, and you're sitting here with a job. So, it's just like there's always, it doesn't matter what's going on. They're always complaining about the federal workforce. And so calling us names like the deep state, which I think, I agree with you on that. That's a crazy thing to even allude to. That is a slap in the face of everybody that does work, good, hard work for the federal government, trying to follow the law. We are, and if some one of us don't follow the law, we pay a price for it, and we should. So stop. So that's my rant. I'm sorry, but you
No,
triggered.
you're exactly on. And it's not just IRS. I mean, all the agencies that NTU represents have given me a great opportunity to see and hear the folks from Customs and Border Protection and the great work that they do, making sure that things are correct at our borders. Our folks in HHS, the things like FDA to make sure that our food is safe, and examinations of different scientific things. I mean, it runs the gamut from all these different agencies. And I've yet to find folks who are just saying, well, I'm working for this person, or I'm working for this person. Every one of them and the employees they represent, they all say, we're working for the American people. We're trying to do things, and we're trying to make it better for the employees and for the American taxpayer. And so that's what the recognition for federal employees means to me. And they should say that, like I said, again, with pay parity.
Well, let's move on to budgets, and that's always a big issue because the budget for the next fiscal year starts October 1st. Not a lot of confidence we'll have a budget in place by October 1st. We just hope we can avoid a shutdown or something
Yeah.
if somebody wants to go nuts in the Congress. Most of the leaders of Congress do not want to shut down. The president doesn't want to shut down, but so we hope it doesn't. But best we can hope for is a continuing resolution to maybe after the election and all this can be settled. But we have two very different versions of a budget. We have budgets in the House which want to slash everything practically. The Senate's working on a budget that is all the way on the other side. They want to have reasonable increases in most agencies' budgets because it's needed. And cuts they think would be a wrong thing. The House wants to cut, and that's what they're doing. The Senate appears to be on the same wavelength as the president. So we'll have to see where this goes. It could be a train wreck. We hope it isn't. But I think it's interesting. This is, to me, when you elect people to Congress, you elect them to make these kinds of decisions. You elect them to make the big calls about how to handle budgets in the government, which is a lot of what these members of Congress do. So I think it's good that everyone working for IRS, everybody who's with NTEU or working for the federal government, or anybody who chooses to watch or listen to this podcast, what's coming up now with this budget season is very important, and we all need to be dialed into it.
Absolutely correct, Larry. This is always huge, and especially now, some of the cuts that the House is looking at, they want to increase the defense spending, which is a usual thing, and to save the money from that, they want to really cut into the civilian budgets, which could have horrendous consequences across the board, frankly. The Senate has looked at this and said, you know what, with inflation, we've got these types of things. We need to have increases in this. And they're not talking crazy increases, under 5%, to try and make sure that the budgets keep up with inflation, keep up with being able to do the job for America that these agencies all need to do. And, you mentioned a train wreck. And this is one of those things where we don't want a train wreck, but when we, several of us, and, you and I are quite the followers of politics in America and elsewhere. And, we can both see that, here's the headlight from this train, here's the headlight from this train. Guess what? They're on the same track and they're deciding to run at each other. And, we know that that's going to be coming. When you talk about folks in Congress, to me, Congress should not be about absolutism. How do we work for the greater good? You're always going to have your core values and beliefs, as well you should. But how do you work for the greater good, making sure things that are needed are going to be done? And if you don't have those types of brave decisions that, make sense to most everybody, you're going to have those folks who vote for shutdowns as opposed to trying to fund things properly. And we both really hope that it doesn't come to that, but we're afraid we do. So, like you said, National NTU has a staff on the Hill that works with us. We have a great legislative staff. We've had our legislative director on here a couple of times to talk to us about legislative issues. They do great work on the House, in the House, the Congress, and talking to the White House and the Senate to try and make sure that our points are well taken. But it's very, very easy on your own time, on your own equipment, to go to ntu.org and write a letter to your congressman or senator. And when I say write a letter, basically they've got preformed letters on all sorts of different issues. You can make any changes you want. You can make it original if you want, and to electronically send it off. It doesn't take but more than a couple of minutes, and it's making your voice heard in Congress on these types of important issues.
All right, so just a reminder that this is going on. We'll keep you updated here, and also we'll plug our Facebook page. You can go to Facebook, go to, excuse me, sorry about that. But you can go to NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana, that exact phrase, NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. You can like or follow our Facebook page, and we try to give regular updates, not every day necessarily, but sometimes more than once a day. It depends on what the news might be that day. But we will try to keep you as up to date as we can. And of course, we'll also do that here on this podcast. Duncan, we're beginning in the summer months. Every 4 years, we have national conventions for both of our major political parties. And as we enter into this season, I think it's a good idea to remind federal employees about their rights and responsibilities under the Hatch Act. Would you like to just give us a quick rundown on that as a reminder?
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't, off work, you can, say whatever you like. You're not forbidden from advocating for one party or another, or particular folks running for office. You absolutely can do that on your own time, on your own equipment. During government time, on government equipment, do not espouse any political views. Do not wear political buttons, shirts, anything of that nature that would be favoring one candidate or one party over another. You simply can't do that. You can give to political causes, political parties, favorite candidates, things of that nature. You cannot ask others to give to those types of organizations or candidates. So those are a couple of the major hits that you want to keep in mind for. So yeah, absolutely can have an opinion, voice your opinion, just not on government time, not on government property.
Yeah, you can run into the weeds on the Hatch Act, and we may do that as we move along with certain aspects of it. You've given the rundown, which is what I ask a reminder if people say there are limits. I'm old enough to remember when my dad worked for the Defense Department, there was a time you could do no political work at all at any time. It wasn't that many years ago. And the rules were changed. So now you can do this on your own time with your own equipment or phones or whatever, but you have to be careful about other things. And fundraising is a really important thing to remember. If you want to work at a phone bank, you cannot solicit or take money for any political candidate or party. So always good to remember. If you want to volunteer for a candidate, fine. Just that if you let the candidate know and the people running the campaign know you're a federal employee, cannot work in any way in fundraising. Somebody brings it up, if you're making phone calls on behalf of a candidate, you have to give somebody else that phone and let them handle that. Okay, Duncan, time for your final comment.
Yeah, I heard something this morning that I thought was very apropos to a situation, and that was the worst part of my job is the dementors. And for those of you who are Office fans and know about Prison Mike, you know exactly what that means. And what it boils down to is when you are in a job that is not appreciating the work that you do, or you're undervalued, or you're overworked, whatever it may be, if you're doing good work, look for something else. If you're not appreciated where you're at, if you're not happy, no job is worth being miserable at. If it's not working out for you, find something else. Your mental health is very, very important. You want to make sure that you continue to do that. So there are jobs out there that will appreciate you. If you're doing good work, you're working hard, you're doing all sorts of your jobs, and your reward for that is either being slighted or, hey, here's a ton more work on top of the work you're already doing because you're doing such great work. So you want to make sure that you take care of yourself and value yourself and make sure that you get the value you should be.
During the last 5 or 6 years I was in government, I became a manager, and I always thought of all the jobs you have as a manager, the most important one is trying to make sure you have a workplace where people don't hate to come to work. It's important that there's an atmosphere. Like we have to work hard and we have to get the work done, but there's no reason that we should have an unpleasant workplace. And I don't know if I succeeded all the time, but that was a goal of mine. And I would hope that would be the goal of any manager, really anywhere, whether you're in government or the private sector. I was a private sector manager too. I'm not so sure I was good at it there, but that's another story. I want to talk in my final comment about journalism. Journalism is a tough business. I volunteered to write a local news blog where I live just because local news is so hard to come by. And the most recent item I saw related to all that, 100 CNN news employees are being laid off. And what's happening is they worked on the online part. They're basically, they've had a section that worked with the online news operation and the television news operation. But they're combining that, losing 100 employees. And I mean, we have to recognize that cable TV isn't what it used to be. The platforms are changing, and I think CNN is trying to adjust to that. Certainly see that, but it's just a very tough time to be a journalist. At a point in America's history where we need the very best journalists we can have, a lot are leaving the business because there just aren't a lot of good jobs out there. And when you get a job and you want to move up, there's no place to go. So I feel bad because America loses. I mean, when journalism is diminished, got to remember, those newspapers we had during revolutionary times, if they hadn't been around, I'm not sure we would have not been an English colony for a heck of a lot longer than we were. So journalism, news, it's such an important ingredient into our American society. And I want everybody to keep that in mind. And I thank you, Duncan Giles, for joining us once again for the Chapter 49 podcast. My name is Larry Lannan, and very happy you've chosen to join us. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and hit the like button. You can subscribe to us on the audio podcast on most of the platforms on which you may be listening to us. So if you can do that, that helps allow more people to know that we're here. And you're welcome to pass the word along if you think this podcast might be of use to others that you know. In the meantime, we want to thank you for listening. Please be safe and be kind.